Hey guys, just wanted to make another video kind of as a follow-up to the planetary interaction guide that I'd made for going from P2 to P4, and I wanted to go ahead and showcase how I go about collecting materials and storing them on the planet. So a couple things just to go through real quick. One of the things that does make this a lot easier is using an epithal to haul your PI materials around, and the important thing for that is going to be your Galente industrial skill. So currently I have that at level 4, and the reason that that is important is if you look at the epithal in the traits, you'll see here that there's a 10% bonus to ship planetary commodity hold capacity per your level of Galente industrial. So currently my ship can hold 63,000 M3. That basically allows me to supply, as you'll see, about 3 planets at a time. So this is all the materials. So you can see here I'm going to be making organic mortar applicators. So currently I actually have those sitting on the planet, and to make those, the inputs that we are going to need is going to be bacteria as a P1, consumer electronics as a P2. That mixed with mechanical parts is going to make our robotics, and then coolant and oxides are going to be combined to make condensates, and then the two of those are going to be combined with the bacteria to make the organic mortar applicators. So I currently run 5 planets. That's, as you can see here, that's all I have the skills for. The other reason for that is currently that is the maximum amount that I can actually haul in one trip. I can haul all of the P4 back to the storage. So I'll showcase that in a minute. But what you'll need, if you're doing the setup that I have in the other video, you're going to need 24,400 of your P1 that you're using, in this case bacteria, and 12,200 of each P2. And there's 4 of those for the products that I showcased here. And then this will allow you to basically run your planet for 28 hours. So there's a few ways you can do it. Initially, I just kind of threw this stuff into my epithal and this kind of dropped off as planets. But then I realized that a faster way to do that is to have something to make it easier. So what I do is break it up into the pieces that I need. So each planet is going to take 4,880 of my P1, and 2,440 of each of my P2s. And so what I realized was, rather than trying to do this while I was in the middle of flying in space, was to just take the time. So basically, as you see here, I have 4880, 2440. This right here is enough to supply 1 planet. So obviously I have 5, so I'm going to mix it out 5 times. So I'm just going to do this quickly, but I'll go ahead and pull these out. Yeah, and I'll showcase here in a minute why this is actually helpful to do it this way. And this especially comes true when you're trying to handle this with multiple accounts at the same time. So for my case, I usually will be doing 2 of these at once. And so this is just a simple way to get that set up. So note, you can drag it anywhere as long as it's not onto itself to get it to split up. Just keep in mind you do want them in separate stacks. And just make sure that you don't stack all, because they will restack if you do that. And in just a second, you'll see why I have it set up this way. Okay, so you see here I have these first 2 are the correct 5 in order, but you'll see all the other ones are off. Now this is 5 wide, and you can resize your screen in and out. You want to intentionally keep that 5 wide, but you'll see there's no order. So if you click out into something else, and then you come back to your item hanger, it will reorder things. And you'll see now I have everything perfectly lined up. So if I go like this, I can just click and select and drag all of the things with 1 click into my commodities hole. So for my setup with my skills, I only supply 3 planets at a time. And so once I have all the materials in my hold for 3 planets, I'm going to go ahead and undock. Make sure you open your planetary production window. And then what we're going to do is we are actually going to pick up the P4 materials as well as drop off our new materials. So on this, you're going to right click. In most cases, you don't want to just click warp to 0. You want to actually go all the way down to customs office and then warp to 0. In some cases, the custom office is on 0 on the planet, but in most cases, it's actually going to be about 100 kilometers off. So you'll see here right now I just have 2, but if I actually slide this out to 3 wide, you'll see now I have these perfectly lined up, and I can just click and drag, and I have a box now that's selecting the exact items that I want to put onto that planet. So I'm going to right click here, go to Customs Office, Access Custom Office, and Planet 1. That's the first one I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and drag your P4s. So this is where you have to keep in mind, this is part of the cost is the taxes. Because I'm doing this in high sec, my tax rate is 15. So it's cost me about 11 million to pull out one side. So basically each planet cost me about 22 million ISK just to pull the P4 materials off. Okay, so now I have those P4 materials are sitting in the customs office. You'll see here I'm out of warp, so I can click and drag these over, and those will all just drop right in there, and click and drag those out. And I'm going to go to the Planet 2 customs office, warp to 0. So now, if you'll recall, if you watched the first video, I intentionally set up the materials to be able to pull from any of the launch pads. So you'll see here it's defaulted to launch pad D1 LBB, and then the other one is M1 LBB. I have found out in my experience before I started doing it this way, that's not consistent. So that's why I set up it so it really doesn't matter which one I'm on. So what I'm going to do is take 2440 of the P1 and move those over. Then I'm going to grab 2 of my P2s. In this case, I know robotics takes consumer electronics and mechanical parts. So I have 2440 of each of those, 2 P2s and 1 P1. And I'm going to click transfer. And you can see here it's costing me 2.7 million ISK. Again, that's your tax rate in high sec. And what you can see here, you know it worked because my numbers went from 2440 and dropped. So the bacteria dropped, the consumer electronic and mechanical parts dropped. That tells me that the materials are being pulled into the factories, which is good. Then I'm going to select my other launch pad and select the remaining materials. Again, 2440 of each of the P2s and P1s. These are my opposite, so the coolant, oxides, and same bacteria. Transfer those to the other launch pad. Again, I can see here the numbers drop down, which means they got pulled into the factories, which is good. So now I'm going to go to Customs Office for Planet 2. And I'm going to basically just repeat the same process, and you'll see here it actually is going to go a lot faster. Now, one note, if you try to click too fast, you'll get a note here saying it's still doing paperwork from your last transaction. You have to wait, I think it's about 3 or 4 seconds in between transactions, which is a little bit annoying, but just something to keep in mind is you can't move too quickly because then the system gets all cranky. All right, so I'm going to basically do the same thing, and I'll just showcase here. I'm going to do coolant oxides first this time. If you do the setup that I showed, it doesn't matter which steps that you do first. It should pull to the factories properly either way. So there we go. Those are all set. And Customs Office 3. I'm going to go ahead and access that. So notice again, I only had 3 planets worth of materials, and that's just because that's all I can hold in the epithal. And I'd have to check because I don't have, actually do have a character with level 5, and I think it's still, you can't quite fit 4 planets even with level 5 Galente. I think you still are confined. Now, if you get good at this, you can actually, as soon as you land in warp, you can actually go to Customs Office and you can warp to the next planet while you're still processing things. Because the epithal is not the world's fastest warper, you'll still have time to transition everything. Now, you do not need to do all of this work that I'm doing now. This can be done as long as you're undocked in the system. So this doesn't have to be done while you're still at the Customs Office. You just have to be undocked to do that. The only thing that has to be done is actually transferring in and out of the Customs Office. That does have to be done while you are at the Customs Office. Okay, so now with these last 2, I'm actually going to go pick up the P4s right now. And the reason for that is I'm going to actually drop off some of these P4s while I'm at the last planet, because I can't hold all of these and the next 2 planets with materials. But what I can do is I can actually drop some of these materials off on my last planet. And what that allows me to do is after I finish dropping off the materials for the last 2 planets, I can actually warp directly from the last Customs Office straight to my outgate to Jita and then drop these off straight at the market. So it actually saves me more time of having to go back, drop off the P4s, dock, get my materials, go back to the planets, go back, dock again, and then pull them back out, which again, it's not that long, but again, the epithal takes, I think it's about 14 seconds align time. So if you use a micro warp drive, it brings it down to 10, but I mean, that's 10 seconds every time you're wanting to warp. So it just adds in extra warps that you don't really need to actually add. So I'm gonna actually go here and I'm gonna say dock at my station. and I'm going to drag some from my inventory into the customs office. Now just in and out, there's no charge unless you're going to the planet. So I have there, the customs office is full, and I now have about 35,000 M3 free, which should be enough to carry the last materials that I need. So now at this point, we're going to go ahead and warp back to the station and pick up the last. So you can see here, you can tell these are actually working, producing the new P4 materials. And these are a portion of my P4s that are ready to be sold. And so as you can see, this part is fairly quick. And again, the materials I just dropped off will keep that running for 28 hours. So if you're, I think you can actually, there's enough room on a planet to refuel it every 24. And so basically it gives you like 4 hours extra. But for me, usually I do it about every 2 days. So actually my factories are not running 100% of the time, but that also is because I have a character that is going through and doing all of the purchasing on market. So I'm actually purchasing through buy orders instead of sell orders, so that in some cases those are filled right away. In other cases, those take a couple of days to fill because I'm not on here 24/7 to manage that. So it's just, again, depending on how you decide to do things will determine what that's going to look like for you, as far as one, how much time it's going to take, and two, you know, how often your factories are running. So now you can see here, by shortening this, I was able to get this to 2. Again, it's a little funky because I have the organic mortar down there, so it offsets this a little bit, but it still gives me the option. I can resize my window just a little bit to where I can just click and drag and select all the materials I want to do. And again, the reason for doing this is it just simply makes it quicker, because this makes it easy if you want to go ahead and warp to the next one while you're still working on stuff. You don't have to click and drag each one of these. You can just do all of them at once. And it's very simple. You're not trying to make sure you grab the right materials. So again, I'm going to go ahead and go to Planet 5 Customs Office, warp to 0. And I'm going to go ahead and transfer these out of my cargo hold. Again, especially when you're first setting up your planet, always check to make sure that these numbers go down, because that your first clue that you mess something up in your routing is if the materials aren't getting pulled from the launch pad. Once you've been doing this for, I would say, you know, you've done it 4 or 5 times without any problems, you probably don't need to wait for those. But the first few times you do, you definitely want to make sure that you are checking those. Okay, so in this case, at this point, as you can see, the customs office is full. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out as many of the organic mortar applicators as I can and fill that up. And then I'm going to actually warp to my Stargate and jump through. Transfer those out and then grab the last of the organic mortar, because it did not all come through. And you should have, if you're doing, in my case, 5 planets, you should have 610. So I do, so that's great. Now on this last planet, I do want to make sure that I get these done before I jump the gate into the next system, because if I don't transfer before I jump the gate, they won't be there. So, and again, it's not that hard to do, because again, this is not a super fast traveling ship. Perfect. So as you can see here, all of these are set up and running, and my planets are up and going. And so that took me from start to where I'm at now about 13 minutes. So it should be right about 15 minutes by the time that I get docked back up in Jeddah. And so that literally is the process of resupplying the planet. So it's pretty straightforward. Again, this is just the way that I started doing it. I didn't do this way initially, and it took longer. And I just started looking for ways to be able to run it faster, as well as a lot of times will have 2 different accounts running at the same time. So it's easier when I'm just click and drag and drop to be able to do that. If you're running multiple PI characters on different accounts, if you're running them all on the same account, that's somewhat questionable, because it doesn't automatically only do one at a time. But if you're running separate accounts, it definitely helps to make this process as simple as possible. So hopefully that helps to answer some questions just on how the resupply works. And as before, if you have any questions, just let me know. Thanks so much.